Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, all former or current NBA players, and Chauncey Billups, also the current head coach of the Detroit Pistons. In an insane story in the NBA today, all of them were arrested by the FBI. The charges are wild. There was a press conference held by Kash Patel, the FBI director, and there's allegations involving the mafia, involving bet rigging, involving fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. I read it. It sounded to me like a story out of The Godfather, but no, this is real. This is actually happening in the NBA today in 2025. What's going on? So let's take a look at the actual indictment, because you always have the government loves to come out with their flashy press conferences, come out with the big names, splashy stories saying we're coming after the bad guys. But the indictment, that's not what's in front of the cameras. That's the actual court paper. That's the actual legal document that the government is relying on, that the government is submitting to the court as the basis for charging these defendants with criminal activity. So let's take a look at these indictments. There's two indictments. We're going to go through one of them right now, and we're going to save the second one for a later episode. One crazy thing to note is that the three biggest names on these indictments are Terry Rozier, Damon Jones, Chauncey Billups. Damon Jones and Terry Rozier are accused of all sorts of fraudulent conduct relating to the NBA. Chauncey Billups is named in a separate, completely unconnected indictment relating to an illegal poker scheme. So they're not even connected. It was all done in one day to make it look like a big story. But without further ado, let's take a look at this indictment. So the two people in this indictment that we're going to focus on, the two big names, Damon Jones and Terry Rozier. So, who is Damon Jones? All right. Damon Jones, also known as D. Jones, was a resident of Texas. Jones was an NBA player from approximately 1999 through 2009 and an NBA coach from 2016 through 2018. So he played 10 years in the league and then coached for 2 years. Terry Rozier, also known as Scary Terry. I'll tell you, as a Heat fan, I don't think opposing players find him very scary, but that's an aside. He was a resident of Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida. He was a professional basketball player who has played in the NBA since 2015. And right now, for the Miami Heat. Now, during the 2022-2023 NBA season, Rozier played for the Charlotte Hornets. He was close friends with another defendant, Deniro Laster, and they had known each other since childhood. Okay. Now, there's NBA regulations. NBA teams are required to report to the NBA information concerning player injury, illness, and the rest for all NBA games, right? So they have to tell the NBA which players are playing and when. Do they have a shoulder injury? Do they have the flu? And they also have to categorize these players. The injury reports identified players as falling within one of the following categories. Available, it means they're playing. Probable means most likely, but there's a small chance they might not play. Questionable, 50-50. Doubtful, highly unlikely. And out, no chance they're playing. The injury reports were updated multiple times throughout each game day. And we're going to see why this is important, because this is how the betting is done based on the injury reports that are provided. Betting companies 1 through 4, entities identity of which are known to the grand jury. So we're just going to keep that private for now. We're not telling the public the name of these betting companies. They're licensed gambling companies operating in the United States. Now, probably why they're not being revealed is probably they've been cooperating with the federal government. And you don't want that public that you're cooperating with the federal government. It's kind of bad for business when you're telling everybody that I'm squealing to the government. But at the same time, the government's breathing down your neck. You've got this illegal activity happening under your watch. Everyone's going to cooperate. Okay. Since approximately 2021, Betting Company 1 and Betting Company 2 have been the co-official sports betting partners of the NBA. Okay, a bunch of other individuals. We're going to skip over these individuals. Okay. A little bit of background on sports betting. It just goes into the history. 1992, several high-profile sports betting scandals, and Congress passed a law, Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, which banned all but 4 states from sponsoring, authorizing, operating, or regulating sports wagering. Now, 4 states were allowed to do it. Nevada, obviously, there's Vegas, Oregon, Delaware, and Montana, and they had existing sports wagering regimes, and they were allowed to continue. The NBA, the betting companies operated online mobile applications. They branded retail sportsbook at various casinos nationwide or both. So again, just getting into the structure of the betting companies. Despite the recent widespread legalization of sports betting, unlicensed bookmakers or bookies also offered sports betting services to bettors. So gambling is a regulated industry. There's certain rules and laws that have to be followed, just like any other business. So if you don't have this license to actually operate, then we don't know you're following the law, and that's a big problem. So these bookies are these unlicensed sports bookmakers, and they frequently accepted bets on betting website that allowed users to place various types of wagers on sports contests based on publicly available betting lines. So the betting, what is a betting line? It's going to talk about it right here. A betting line was a number set by odds makers to represent the expected outcome of a particular event, right? So we're going to say we expect the Heat to win every game that they play against sub 500 teams by at least 5 points. So in the context of prop bets, a betting line was a number set by odds makers for a given outcome. For example, an odds maker might set the betting line for a given player's points in a given game at 20. So we say we think this player is going to get 20 points. So that's where we'll start. Bettors would then have a choice to bet under, i.e. that the player will score fewer than 20 points in the game, or over, that the player will score more than 20 points. So we're starting at 20, that's the threshold, and you can place a bet that they're going to get more than 20 or less than 20, but that's where we're starting. Odds makers have proprietary process for setting betting lines, so they have their own analysis, how they come up with how they're going to set the betting line. But betting lines generally took into account all publicly known information relevant to a given bet. So, for example, the injury report that the NBA publicly releases, that's public, and that can be used by the bookmakers and by the betting companies to make that determination of how we're going to set the betting line. Now we get into the juicy part, the fraudulent wagering schemes. From December 2022 to March 2024, all these defendants, including Damon Jones and Terry Rozier, participated in a scheme to defraud the betting companies. What did they do? They used non-public information relating to NBA games to place and cause others to place fraudulent sports wagers for profit and to launder the proceeds. So the betting companies make money based off their own proprietary information, but everybody is on the same playing field, so to speak, and that they're all using publicly available information. So now Terry Rozier and Damon Jones were privileged to information that other people in the general public were not. And that information could impact the bet and what the outcome of a certain bet might be. So it's going to go on. The fraudulent wagering scheme typically involved various iterations of the same patterns within a network of co-conspirators. The defendants and certain co-conspirators, again, they had access to private information known by NBA players or NBA coaches, again, likely to affect the outcome of upcoming NBA games or individual players' performances. They then provided the other co-conspirators this non-public information in exchange for either a flat fee or a share in expected wagering profits for the purpose of betting. So in other words, players in the NBA like Damon Jones and Terry Rozier, they sold this information. So they go to this bookie or this other person and they say, okay, I have information about who's going to play in this game, who's not going to play in this game. You give me a percentage of what you win by placing this bet, and I'll tell you this information. So they're selling this illegal information. The co-conspirators disseminated the non-public betting information through a network of individuals. So they have all these people. Then they placed the bets on the other people's behalf. So this whole pool of people getting together, making this arrangement, and you have a couple of individuals who are going to be the ones actually placing the bets. Or they directed others to place the wagers, all with the intention of profiting off the scheme at the expense of the betting companies. In other words, the betting companies are going to lose money because they're going to have to pay out money, and they're losing money because you're acting on information that they did not know. So they set the betting lines based on certain information, and you used information that you knew that they were not privileged to change the scale and tip the scales in your favor in an unfair, illegal way. As a result, many of the wagers were placed in connection with betting lines that did not reflect or account for private information known by defendants and their co-conspirators, rendering the wagers more profitable. Again, the people setting the betting lines did not know, and the other people did know. And then what did they do? They placed these wagers through betting companies' mobile applications. So they had, apps in which you can do it, and through Sportsbook. In doing so, the defendants and their co-conspirators made and caused others to make materially false and misleading statements and representations to the betting companies, and to omit to state one or more material facts which made what was represented under the circumstances misleading. So what is the false information? Including that wagers were placed in accordance with the betting company's terms and conditions, such as, here's the kicker, house rules prohibiting, among other things, wagering based on non-public information, and straw betting. Straw betting meaning you're placing the bet on behalf of a third party. So it's somebody else's money or information that's non-public. So in other words, every time you sign up for anything, you sign up for Netflix, whatever you're signing up for, there's a whole, laundry list. You have to click, I accept the terms and conditions. So when you're going through these betting companies' mobile applications, they have a similar kind of thing where they say at the bottom, I accept the terms and conditions. And one of those terms and conditions are that you do not have access to non-public information and you're not acting based on non-public information. And they were, and they accepted that they were not. They hit a button that said, I accept the terms and conditions, or maybe they had to even sign their name that said they were not, and they actually were. At least that's the allegation in the indictment. In many instances, the defendants and their co-conspirators' fraudulent bets were successful and were paid out by the betting companies because they had access to this insider information. The betting companies would not have paid the bettors for successful wagers had they known that the bettors possessed non-public information pertaining to the event, or they're placing the wagers at the direction of and for the benefit of others. So it's two things. The big thing, the flashy thing everyone's talking about is that they used prohibited information. And then the smaller thing, a little more technical, but also prohibited, is that they're placing the bets on behalf of a third party. You're not allowed to do that. It's just you. Now, what else do they do? In furtherance of the scheme and to conceal the proceeds derived from it, they engaged in and caused others to engage in transactions between themselves, acting on their behalf, including peer-to-peer payment platform transfers, bank wires, and cash exchanges. So, for example, if John Doe gets $100,000 from his bet, he doesn't want this $100,000 sitting in his bank account because that looks suspicious. Where did he get this $100,000 from this illegal bet? So he's going to go and he's going to try to hide this money by giving it to Bob Smith next door. He's going to wire some money to Bob Smith. He's going to give some cash to his grandmother. He's going to give some money to his gardener. So it's spread out among all these people. It makes it harder to trace. And you know, these big lump sums sitting in the bank account that looks suspicious. Now, specifics, examples of some of the fraudulent wagers and the laundering of the proceeds. Here we go. During the 2022-2023 NBA season, Terry Rozier played for the Hornets. Prior to the Hornets' March 23rd, 2023 game against the New Orleans Pelicans, Rozier informed the defendant, Danilo Laster, that he was going to prematurely remove himself from the game in the first quarter due to a supposed injury and not return to play further. So Rozier says, I am going to take myself out of this game. I'm going to pretend I have an injury and not play the whole game. Okay. So now Lester knows, okay, Rozier is not going to play the whole game. He's only going to play 10 minutes. And now why did he tell this to this Laster? He did it so Laster could then place a bet. Now, Rozier was not on the Hornets injury report prior to the game. So no one knows that Rozier was injured, right? So only this Laster knows there might be an injury. And Hornets officials were not aware of his plans to exit the game prematurely. If they were, they would have had to disclose that on the injury report. They didn't. That's a problem. The public, including the betting companies, also were not aware of Rozier's plan to exit the game prematurely. So Rozier created a scheme by himself, and no one else knows about it. We'll see why that's a problem. The defendant sold the information about Rozier's plan to leave the game early to multiple other people, right? So now not only does Laster now have the ability to place these bets and then get money, he's selling this information to other people. He's selling insider information. So it's a double whammy. He's able to profit from his own betting. He's able to profit from selling this information illegally. Prior to the March 23rd game, Laster, Fairley, and co-conspirator 1 exchanged text messages confirming that Rozier planned to exit the game prematurely and confirming their plan to place wagers on Rozier's unders. In other words, that Rozier would underperform relative to the odds makers' betting lines for his individual performance. What does that mean? Rozier was averaging around 20 points a game. So the betting companies will say, okay, well, Rozier's averaging 20 points a game. He seems to be pretty healthy. He's had a good year so far. We're going to set the betting line at 20 points for Rozier to score. So you can either bet that he'll score more than 20 or bet that he'll score under 20. Most people are probably not going to bet that he's scoring under 20 because he'd been playing so well. So if you bet that you place a bet he's going to score under 20, you stand to get a large gain because that's a very unlikely bet. So it's very low odds. So obviously the lower the odds, the greater your winnings. Now what happened? This defendant Fairley then provides the information to another individual, Hennon. Hennon, both himself and through this network of straw bettors, now all these people can then place bets on defendant Rozier's unders. So now you have all these people seemingly unconnected are placing these bets that Rozier is going to go under. Now, Fairley provided the information to Hennon and agreed to place and direct his associates to place bets on Rozier's under based on agreements between Hennon that would give Farley a share of the profit. So everybody's profiting from this scheme. On March 23rd, 2023, and prior to the start of the March 23rd game, defendant Hennon placed multiple bets. So now they're building up to what the plan was. Now, once we said the plan, we have to say they actually did it. So here, they actually did it. They placed multiple bets at a retail sportsbook operated by Betting Company 3, totaling $61,000, all of which were either straight or parlay bets on defendant Rozier's unders. In addition to placing bets on Rozier's unders himself, Hennon then gets his whole network of other associates to place bets on Rozier's unders at Hennon's direction, including but not limited to the following bets, all of which were placed on March 23rd, 2023, prior to the start of the March 23rd game. So now, again, it's just going to give you a list of all the different bets that he did. So again, they have to say he bet at this and this time, and these are all the various acts. Each individual bet, one by one, was another violation of the law. Okay. So co-conspirator 5 placed multiple straight bets on Rozier's unders. He got $12,000. Co-conspirator 6 placed approximately $800 bet using the company one's mobile applications on the under, and it just goes on and on and on. What's striking to me, and a lot of people have raised this, you're talking about $10,000, $12,000, $4,000. Yes, for me and you, the average person, that's a lot of money. Terry Rozier made $100 million in his career. Why is Terry Rozier doing this? There's something else that we don't know yet, but there's got to be something else going on. It doesn't make sense. What does Rozier need a little bit more money? How much is he getting paid? How much is he selling here? Why is he doing this? It just, again, it doesn't make sense for another $50,000, $100,000 for Terry Rozier when he's made $100 million in his career. It doesn't add up. So it's very weird. I don't know what's going on. And now here we go. Here's the kicker. So they placed all the bets. And now what happened? During the game, Rozier removed himself from the game in the first quarter and did not return. He played 9 minutes and 34 seconds. Obviously, if he's playing only 9 minutes, his odds of scoring 20 points are pretty low. Well below his season average of approximately 35 minutes a game. He scored 5 points, recorded 2 assists, made 1 3, well below his per game averages of approximately 21 points, 5 assists, and 2 3-pointers. So way below his numbers. Okay. Now comes the money laundering. This defendant, Marv's Fairley, then traveled to Philadelphia to collect the proceeds from defendant Hennon. So one guy's getting the money from the other guy. And then De Niro Laster also traveled to Philadelphia to collect money from Farley. Again, these are the proceeds from the fraudulent wagering scheme. And then Rozier paid for all this. He paid for these people to come and collect this money. So Rozier started it, and then it's this whole network coming down. In or about between the late night hours of March 28, 2023, and the early mornings of March 29, 2023, Fairley gave Laster tens of thousands of dollars as cash as payment for the non-public information that Laster had obtained from Rozier. Again, tens of thousands of dollars. To me and you, that's a lot. To Terry Rozier, that's nothing. What is he doing? I don't know. Now we have the Portland Trailblazers game. And we're not going to get every single game, but it's just another instance of what happened is that the Portland Trailblazers were a terrible team at the time, still are a terrible team. 32-40, out of playoff contention. Only 10 games remaining. Co-conspirator 8, who was not named, told Eric Ernest that the Trailblazers were going to be tanking, meaning intentionally losing, to increase their odds of getting a better pick in the upcoming draft. For all those that don't follow the NBA, there's a draft. They draft players out of college, and the teams with the worst records have the highest picks. So the highest picks means they can get access first choice to the best players. So teams want to lose, so they're going to get a higher pick because if they're not making the playoffs, anyway, the season is considered lost. So may as well try to cash out and get the best pick we can to improve our team's odds for the future. But the information the Blazers would be taking and not playing player one was not available to the public. So again, people didn't know it's insider information. Prior to the March 24th game, defendant Ernest provided this non-public insider information to Marv's Fairley so that Fairley could place the fraudulent wagers on the game and share the profits with Ernest. In exchange, Fairley promised to pay Ernest at least $5,000 if the bets against the Trailblazers were successful. So again, we don't know who this co-conspirator is, as this co-conspirator was not named. But presumably it's somebody inside the NBA, inside the Portland Trailblazers. If you're working in any capacity for the Portland Trailblazers, whether player, coach, staff, you're probably making a lot of money. So these amounts, again, just seem small amounts compared to what they're making. So again, this is all very, very strange. And it goes on and on and on. And again, it's essentially that they're benching certain players and no one knows they're benching. And that obviously changes the odds, right? If Michael Jordan's playing versus Michael Jordan not playing, dramatically changes the odds of whether or not the Chicago Bulls are going to win a game. So the Blazers not playing their best players, people didn't know. They thought the players were going to win. They placed that caused the betting lines to be a certain way. And then the fact that these other people knew that these players were not going to play, they were able to cash out and get money by betting the low odds. So let's go on. Let's just see what else there is. Let's wrap it up here. And again, it just goes on and on for each game. And again, an indictment, like any kind of legal proceeding, there's elements to crime, there's elements to cause of action, whether it's civil, whether it's criminal. And there's different components to it. And you have to prove every single component. And that's why everything is laid out in such detail and goes on and on and on, because they have to prove every step of the way. They plotted this, and then they did it, and then they benefited from it, and they did it for the purpose of committing a crime. Now, on the morning, here's what's really damning. On the morning of February 9th, Damon Jones sent a message to a co-conspirator writing, "Get a big bet on Milwaukee tonight before the information is out. Player 3 is out tonight. Bet enough so D. Jones can eat 2 now." If this text message is really there, and again, the government has to prove it, and they have to prove it's authentic, but on its face, it seems very damning. I don't know how Damon Jones is going to get out of that one. It seems very, very damning. Again, another text message. "Hit me ASAP. Got one for you, dude." Says he got some info. Again, lawyers are going to try to spin it. They didn't mean this. This doesn't prove that. You have to see the full context. And that's what's going to happen at trial. If it goes to trial, what happens? Some of them might plead guilty. There might be certain people flipping on others. Also happens all the time. So those are the factual allegations. Now we'll just wrap up with what are the actual criminal activity that they're being charged with. Count 1, wire fraud or conspiracy to commit wire fraud. What did they do? They knowingly and intentionally conspired to devise a scheme and artifice to defraud the betting companies and obtain money and property from them by means of one or more materially false and fraudulent pretenses, representations, and promises, and for the purpose of executing such scheme and artifice, to transmit and cause to be transmitted by means of wire communications in interstate and foreign commerce. That's a lot. What all wire fraud is that you used digital communications, right? Digital wires to do some kind of fraudulent or illegal activity. And that's what they're saying here. using text messages, using other sorts of digital communications, using bank accounts to, move your fraudulently earned proceeds. You're using the wires, electronic communications, um, in order to commit a crime, and that's wire fraud. What's what the government is alleging. Money laundering, very similar. You're taking money that you got illegally and you're trying to hide it. In other words, you clean it by spreading it out into different places. So by taking the cash and distributing it to the whole network of people, they were doing it in order to hide the money from the government or from people that would look into this and find out what they were doing. So that's about it for the indictment. It's going to be interesting to follow. We're going to keep an eye on it. Again, innocent until proven guilty. Right now, these are just allegations. It's an indictment. The old expression goes, you can indict a ham sandwich. Obviously, the attorneys are already spinning a different, very different story than the government is spinning right now. So we'll see what happens. Crazy story. Sports fans, um, anybody who's interested in business, financial crimes, anything like that. Fascinating story. We're going to keep an eye on it. Stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see everybody next time.